Welcome to On the Middle East, Al Monitor's podcast on the big stories in the region. My name is Amrin Zaman, and once again I'll be looking at the watershed elections in Turkey that are due to be held on May 14th. Recent opinion polls suggest the race will be very tight. Some predict that Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party may be edged out of power after more than 2 decades at the helm. The stakes are high, and every single vote counts. Kurdish votes count more than any, as witnessed during the 2019 mayoral polls, which saw Erdogan's men pushed out by the opposition in Ankara and Istanbul. The pro-Kurdish HDP bloc looks set once again to side with the opposition, leaving Erdogan scrambling for the support of pious Kurds. In a highly controversial move, he's reached out to the Islamist Huda Par party, which sprang from Hizbullah, a violent Islamist Kurdish group that clashed with secular Kurds throughout the 1990s, with the backing of the Turkish state. With us here today to talk about Hizbullah and its latter-day incarnation is Mashuq Kurt, an assistant professor of sociology at the Royal Holloway University's Department of Law and Criminology. Mashuq is also the author of a widely acclaimed book on Hizbullah. The group has no connection to its namesake in Lebanon. Welcome to our program, Mashuq. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So you're a great expert on the Kurdish movement Hizbullah, which is very different to its Lebanese namesake. Mashuq, can you kick off by just giving us a general sense of what Hizbullah is? Who are these people?
Yes, of course. So Hizbullah movement in Turkey is different from the Lebanese counterpart, which is excessively a Shi'i organization, whereas Hizbullah in Turkey is a Sunni organization with a Kurdish majority, ethnically Kurdish people, basically. It has been established in late 1970s, early 1980s, by its founder, who studied political science at Ankara University Political Science Department, as known as Mülkiye, by Hüseyin Velioğlu, and 2 other imams and 2 engineers. So in the 1980s, basically, this is the post-Iran Islamic Revolution environment, and Hizbullah movement basically split from the National Vision movement in a way, because when we look at the formation of the leaders of Hizbullah, we see that they all studied or stayed with the Milli Türk Talebe Birliği, the National Student Union Organization, as well as some other Islamist organizations of their Turkish counterparts. So their motivation at the beginning was to establish a Sharia-based regime in the country, and they had a more kind of like a universal view on Islamic fraternity, although from the beginning their constituencies or their support base was consisted of the Kurdish citizens in Turkey. So in the 1980s, basically first they relied on family and tribal ties, as well as Imam Hatip students in just religious high schools, and some Islamist imams in the region, although most of them departed after the conflict started between Hizbullah and other organizations. And in the 1980s, they also moved to Diyarbakir city center, and they expanded there.
I just want to remind our audience of who the National View is, and that's the movement that was founded by the late Necmettin Erbakan. We can say Turkey's first sort of Islamist party that was very Sunni and nationalist, Turkish nationalist at its core. And you're saying that Hizbullah sort of had some contact with them, but then diverged. I just want to make sure that our audience understands the context.
Yes, so basically the National Vision Movement, Milli Görüş Hareketi, has been an incubation ground for the Islamist political movements in Turkey, have established a number of political parties, succeeded one by another after the ban of these political parties. Eventually, the main splits happened after the 28th February military memorandum that overthrew the coalition government. As a result, the Welfare Party split into two, one of which is the current Islamist government of Turkey, Justice and Development Party, and the other one, the former one, basically is represented by two political parties at the moment. But their influence on the Islamist political thoughts in Turkey is quite foundational, and many people somehow had connection with this political party, including the leadership of Hizbullah movement.
So going back to Diyarbakir.
Yeah. So basically in the early 1990s, the tension, the contentious politics, and the aggressive recruitment of the Hezbollah led to this conflictual relationship with their former allies. So they started eliminating other smaller Kurdish Islamist organizations and kind of created a monopoly over this field. This is also a period where the tension between the secular Kurdish movement, the PKK, and Hezbollah bases and supporters started. In 1991, the PKK has executed the parents of one Hezbollah member in Idil district of Shirnak. It meant to be the Hezbollah member himself, but he was not home. And this led to the beginning of a very dark, violent period where also the state authorities, especially the military intelligence, JITEM, and other organizations started infiltrating Hezbollah and encouraging, supporting them for the execution of Kurdish activists and civilians. As a result, between 1991 and 1996, over 700 civilians from the supporting base of the PKK, but also from the Hezbollah side, have lost their lives, and this followed by basically kind of an execution of Hezbollah members on the ground of their involvement with the intelligence and stuff. So in 2000s, there was a turning point because there was this security operation, the house raid on a villa in Istanbul Beykoz district, where the Hezbollah leadership and the Hezbollah archive was seized. I mean, the leader was killed and the archive was seized, and this led to massive security operations across the Kurdish region and across the country, especially in cities like Konya. Over 10,000 members of Hezbollah have been detained and arrested. Some of them have been involved in conflict, in violence, executing other people, working as a trigger man. And also there were thousands of people who were just involved in non-violent aspect of Hezbollah activities. For example, teaching Quran in the mosques and stuff. And also these people have been in prison. So there was this silent period between 2000 and 2004, and then Hezbollah reappeared in the public space in the form of a civil society organizations soon after the Islamist government of Turkey, the current Islamist government of Turkey, came to power.
So basically, as you pointed out, Hezbollah started off as a sort of organic, organization that was later sort of taken over, used by the deep state, and once it had fulfilled its mission, was discarded, shut down. Is that what you're saying? And then with the emergence of the AKP, they found a more friendly environment in which they could reappear again. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes, more or less this is the case. I mean, they basically emerged as a conservative Kurdish Islamist organization with more emphasis on their Islamist ideology than their ethnic identity. Obviously, 1990s is also a period when there was this dirty war between the state and the Kurdish insurgency. So the emergence of Hezbollah in this period obviously created an opportunity on the state side to infiltrate into the group and manipulate them, or providing them with impunity, and kind of like, creating or manipulating this fratricide between the Kurdish people, so that they can basically deal with the urban unrest and support for the PKK.
But when they reappeared in the 2004, as you said, they sort of appeared with a brand new face, didn't they? Can you tell us a little bit about the rebranding of Hezbollah and how real is it?
I mean, yes, they reappeared in public space with a new discourse. Obviously, their principles, their ideals, as they also state, have not changed significantly. What has changed is the implementations of these ideals, or the search for these ideals. So their methods have changed. Previously, they were more secretive, clandestine, underground, and they relied on a very core base, quite loyal and ready to get involved in violence to some extent, whereas this has proven to be ineffective. So when they emerged in the public space, also there was this available environment as a part of this liberal Islamist opening under the AKP, and also as a part of the EU negotiation process, the civil society organizations and the opening of these civil society organizations were very much encouraged. So, but obviously it is important to distinguish between Hezbollah and the legal movements that they succeeded in. There is apparently a connection between the social basis of these two organizations. So the supporting base of Hezbollah kind of subsequently started supporting and voting for Huda Par, for example. But this is a case, as I would say, also for the mainstream Kurdish political movement as well, where there is an armed part and there is also the legal part.
So you're referring to the HDP and the PKK.
Yeah, so I kind of like equating the legal organizations of Huda Par and Mustazaflar and these organizations with Hezbollah, with an armed organization, is a reductionist approach. We need more nuance to kind of contextualize how their motivations changed or remained the same, and what is...
So what do they want? What does this civilian sort of organization state as its goal? You said they remained unchanged, but my understanding is that more, in recent years, they seem to have embraced Kurdish nationalism much more sort of pronouncedly than they had in the 80s as Hezbollah.
I mean, I think the main issue, the main difference is the accountability. When you kind of come up with civil society organizations and a political party, you cannot just rely on this abstract universal ideals, but you need to provide some tangible solutions or create some tangible discourses that you can engage with the local population, your supporting base. So after they legalize their activities, this was the significant change. What they want as a legal entity is, I mean, definitely they have like this conservative view on how the social political life needs to be organized. And their view is very much static. It is not like really kind of engaging with the fact that society is not something that remained the same, whereas their notion of Kurdishness is, for example, is rooted in this conservative ideals of Islam, the family, the tradition, and whatever kind of diverts from this vision is seen as something corrupt or
Heretic.
even Kurdish, heretic, I would say, yes. So obviously, it's like in 2006, when there was this Denmark,
The
what is it called?
cartoons, the
The
Prophet Muhammad
cartoon
cartoons.
controversy. Yeah, the cartoon controversy in Denmark led to this protest in Diyarbakir, where about 1 million people attended the protest, and this was kind of one of the first big public show of the Mustazaflar Association, the Association for the Oppressed. And after that, they started organizing these public events where not only Hezbollah members or supporters attended, but like the broader conservative religious practicing Muslims from the region also started attending the Blessed Birth event to celebrate Prophet Muhammad's birthday every year, every April. This kind of gave them a public visibility, and they started diversifying their activities, opening newspapers, magazines in Turkish and Kurdish, the madrasas, hundreds of different civil society organizations under different names, but their main organization basically were prosecuted in 2008 and eventually banned, closed down by the Supreme Court. And at this stage, basically, the movement has decided to accelerate their process of opening a political party. And that's how they established Huda Par, the Free Cause Party, or it is kind of a pun word. Huda in Kurdish means God, in Persian as well. So Huda Par is the party of God, which kind of translates as Hizbullah in Arabic. But
So
yeah,
it's a play on words. But just to clarify, you said the organization was banned. Which one are you talking about?
Mustazaflar
Oh,
Association.
the association which was linked to Hezbollah was
Uh,
banned by the courts on the grounds that
yeah,
it was somehow engaged
connected.
in terrorist activity of some kind.
I think some of their members were charged with Hezbollah charges.
Okay, and so this accelerated the process of establishing this party, whose base obviously is very attractive to Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Yeah, it seems like it. It
And
was
so
not.
now we have Erdogan in talks with Huda Par and hoping to add Huda Par to his electoral alliance, right? As he goes into the elections, because, there's this cliche out there now that, the Kurds are the kingmakers. They hold the key to electoral victory in Turkey. And obviously the Kurds are not a monolith. And while you have a significant number, some 13% maybe, who vote for HDP, the secular Kurdish movement, then you have these more religious Kurds who would actually vote for the AKP for a long time. But now that's in question, right? First of all, they don't like what the AKP's been doing to the Kurds in Syria, this sort of much more militarist approach. And the alliance with Bahçeli obviously doesn't go down well. So how does Erdogan square this circle? How does he bring Huda Par to his side? And what is the significance of this, in fact? And isn't it kind of scary, to be honest, knowing these people's past? And also, if you could talk a little bit about the events of 2015 and Yasin Buru and all the, the sort of seeming revival of the violence between Hezbollah supporters and the PKK in Diyarbakir.
Yes, I mean, important questions. Well, like, first of all, we need to acknowledge that Huda Par is a legitimate political party established based on the laws overruling Turkey, most of the time when Erdogan allows, obviously. So their establishment, I mean, Erdogan now sees much opportunity in them, obviously. Yet when they were established, they were not that significant to Erdogan because at the time he was maintaining conversations with the mainstream Kurdish political movement as a part of the peace process, right? And then there comes the Syrian war. And in 2014, in October, when ISIS surrenders this little Kurdish town, Kobani, on the Turkish border, so we all remember that there was this Kurdish riots, as known as Kobani protest. And this is
And that's
definitely
because Erdogan seemed to want ISIS to capture Kobani, right? And that, of course, provoked huge anger among Turkish Kurds.
Yes, I mean, it was basically for the Kurdish people, it was a big disappointment to see just on the southern side of the border that their co-nation, the Kurdish people, most of whom had familial and kinship ties with the people living in Turkey, are suffering under ISIS, whereas Turkey is just doing nothing. And this inaction definitely triggered a lot of anger. So the Kurdish protesters started basically blocking the roads between cities to the neighborhoods, and even international roads such as the Silk Road that goes to the Iraqi Kurdistan, right? So during this period, obviously, there was also this collective memory of Hezbollah from the 1990s that resulted in this tragic event. So some of the protesters basically surrendered to this pro-Hezbollah civil society organizations, and they found a number of young men who were distributing the meat because it was also the Eid al-Adha. Among
So they
them,
surrounded that association, you're saying?
yeah, they attacked the association. They brutally murdered a number of Hezbollah members. And this was a turning point because until that point, we need to acknowledge that Huda Par community really was careful not to engage with any conflict. Of course, they did not confront their past, yet they were careful to just like use legal nonviolent means, although sometimes their pressure, especially stemming from their conservative worldview, was too much on secular activities, organizations, and individuals in the region. But the murder of Yasin Börü and his friends basically put an end to this kind of friendly rivalry between these two movements. And as a result, the Hizbullah members, some of the Hizbullah members known as Sheikh Said Seriyeleri and Hüseyin'in Fedaileri, so two battalions, I would say, appeared in the public square of Diyarbakir and Batman, and they also executed a number of Kurdish protesters. The situation did not escalate further, but definitely the murder of Yasin Börü marked a new beginning, a new rivalry and enmity, at least revived a new enmity between these two organizations.
But I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but it's interesting though that these two battalions just popped up so quickly. So clearly, even as they avoided conflict, they were clearly prepared for it.
Yes, but I mean, we need to also kind of remember that this is a period where almost everyone is somehow armed. Because, you know, just a year after that, we will see the armed conflict, the YDGH,
the Revolutionary Youth Wing of the PKK, yeah.
We will see also people feeling increasingly insecure in the region and obtaining some arms because just on the southern border there is ISIS.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised that there are some people armed and like, you know, appeared on the streets on this ground. But obviously
Erdogan used that event, though, didn't he?
Of
The
course.
murder of these Hizbullah youths, and the name Yasin Buru has become,
Yeah, yeah.
emblematic. And he
Over
keeps
50
using
people,
that, doesn't he?
over 50 people lost their lives, among whom there were 4 or 5 people from the Huda Par community, right? We don't remember the name of those people who were executed by the security forces, but
No.
definitely the name of Yasin Buru has been enlivened and utilized by the government to kind of further deepen this divide between the Kurds.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it was also served as a ground to criminalize or further criminalize the legal political party HDP, whose former leader is still in prison, mostly based on accusations stemming from this period, the Kobani protests, right? So definitely Kobani holds something much bigger than its physical space. It is a turning point in the Kurdish politics because it is when also the state apparently has decided to end the peace negotiation process and kind of open the ground for these more criminal-leaning organizations, their support in Syria with al-Nusra and all that,
Yeah, but coming back to what Hezbollah, or rather Huda Par, wants, and in particularly with regard to Kurdish and nationalist aspirations, I mean, they do want some kind of federal status, isn't that right, for the Kurds? And how do you bring together a group that's demanding that with someone like Devlet Bahçeli, the leader of the Nationalist Movement Party, who is at the exact opposite end of that spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, it is not surprising. It's a very old strategy of the Turks from the Ottomans. It's like, when someone is not that powerful, they will just utilize them, use them, and when they gain some power and stuff. I mean, I'm not suggesting that Hüdapar is merely just a tool. They have their own agency, they have their own ideals and ideas, and definitely they see this as an opportunity to kind of widen their support and, like, if they have 2 or 3 members in the parliament and if they have their emblem in the Turkish National Assembly as a part of this, it will be a significant gain for them to just reach out to more people. And obviously, when we think of the state as a legitimacy given authority, obviously this will just, like, seal the process of legitimizing the movement.
So it's a very pragmatic move on their part. And their base will understand that and go along with it, presumably. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't think that the Nationalist Movement Party and Devlet Bahçeli have a particular like for Hüdapar. Yet they also want to win in this election. And if we remember in the past one, for example, Devlet Bahçeli even suggested that Abdullah Öcalan send a letter and the political party should abide by that or something like that. It is something unbelievable that Devlet Bahçeli would say, but he did it. So, like, in the real political sphere, I think these things are understandable. And obviously, Hüdapar has negotiations with the governments, not with the MHP.
Not with Bahçeli. And how much actual support does Hüdapar command in Turkey?
It is not a big support. So what we know from a number of election results, they have about like 200,000 votes, give or take, 5-10% of this. But obviously, when we look at the local level, then this means a lot, especially like in cities like Diyarbakır, Ahmet. Their support is like around 40,000, 35,000 votes. probably in this election, many people will also depart from AKP, but they will not vote for HDP. So then Huda Par becomes a viable option for the conservative, mostly elderly Kurdish people from region. And AKP does not want to give that image. Like they would happily give 1 or 2 seats to Huda Par, but still they will have these votes in their own poll, right? This is one thing. And the second is obviously the mobilizing power of Huda Par, especially if they are given some significant positions. Like, let's say their members, Zekeriya Yapıcıoğlu or someone else, are listed as the second or third person in the AKP list, then these people will work harder than the AKP members who almost disappeared from the region after years of violence and discrimination and increasing nationalism. So Huda Par members basically will be able to reach out and talk to people much more than the AKP members in the region. And Erdogan wants to use this as an opportunity.
But I mean, I understand the politics, but again, getting back to the risk factor, is there any, danger of, Huda Par, a repeat, let's say, of the Kobani incidents, especially in a scenario where the result of that election is contested?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, this is a possibility. And when these things emerge, the AKP does not shy away from utilizing and using them. We have seen in previous elections some very shady executions of members of HDP or Huda Par during the election period. So that was a clear motive in 2015 when Hamdullah Öğe, or from the Huda Par side, a number of other people were executed in the city of Bingöl or in Diyarbakir and in several other places where there was conflict and kidnapping and stuff. And when these things happen, definitely, it will give an opportunity to the state authorities to further criminalize the HDP and kind of create this image to connect them to terrorism and open more space and ground for Huda Par. I think Huda Par will not jump into such a possibility, yet if something dramatic happens, then I cannot really
Rule it
foresee.
out.
People will just, yeah.
Finally, of course, what's interesting is that women inside the AKP have reacted very negatively to this proposed alliance, because, of course, Huda Par has a very anti-feminist approach and wants to repeal various rights for women that are currently enshrined in the law. At the same time, it's, of course, very much in step with the AKP's current anti-LGBT stance. All of that is quite worrying when you consider that maybe these people will enter the parliament and have some influence. What do you have to say about that?
Yes, it is indeed very worrying. I mean, now that Huda Par is a legal organization and usually they rely on non-violent legal means, it doesn't mean that they are progressive. So when we look at their policies, obviously we see like this very strict, misogynist, almost, or clearly misogynist, anti-feminist stance. They want to create a very monolithic society, and I don't think that they have a clear understanding of diversity and agency of people. So, and this is of course worrying for women, for youth, and for many other in the country who wants to live in dignity and peace. It doesn't mean that them having 2-3 members in the parliament will empower them to implement all these policies altogether. But definitely it will just create a discursive space in which these people can disseminate their ideas. And obviously, like when we look at the evolution of the conflict and violence, discourse precedes and violence comes later, right?
Well, yes, and we of course have those horrible memories of what they did to Gonca Kurish, the Islamist feminist, how they murdered her so brutally and tried to set an example through her. Well, Mashuq, thank you so very much for this very, very enlightening conversation. We hope to have you again on our program after the elections to, evaluate the outcome. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Hopefully, we will speak in a better environment following the elections in the new Turkey.
And this brings us to the end of another episode of On the Middle East. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Mashuq. Thank you and goodbye.